Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in again. I am Katie Batesman, the Manager Director, Community and Partnerships at SheCanCode. And today we're discussing from design to development when you thought tech wasn't for you. I've got the wonderful Ella Mark, front-end developer at Field with me today, who never expected to end up in tech and definitely didn't expect to enjoy it. Now working at Field, she's here to share her journey from design to development, how she overcame imposter syndrome, and what it's like working at a company that actively supports her growth. Welcome, Ella. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It is so exciting to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for taking some time out to chat on spilling the tea. We'd love to start with a little bit about you, if that's okay. An overview as to who you are, about how you ended up at Field, and what you do.
100%. So I am Ella Mark. I am a front-end developer here at Field. And I've been here for about 5 years now, which feels insane to think about. I had come from a non-traditional background. So I was a graphic designer originally and ended up transitioning around the COVID time. And yeah, as you said, was never expecting to make that transition. That was something that came very much out of the blue, as I'm sure we'll kind of dive into over the next half an hour or so. But it's been a really, really interesting 5 years, and I am very thankful that I'd kind of accidentally ended up stumbling into this world.
I love that when you look back and you go, how has 5 years flown by at that company? That's when you know you're at the right company, because when things are dragging and you get to the end of the year and you're like, well, I haven't really achieved anything this year, not looking forward to the next year. But when you've been there five and that's flown by, that's a really lovely journey to be part of as well. And part of a company that is growing so fast as well. That's you just know you landed on your feet when that happens.
Oh, completely. I mean, when I joined Field, it was tiny at the time. I think there was maybe 25 people there, and now it has, 150 odd employees. It is kind of skyrocketed in terms of people knowing the company. I remember, when I'd first tell people about working at Field, no one had heard of it. And now everyone I know has. And it's,
Yeah.
been so exciting to see something go from this very scrappy startup to a real proper company. So
Yeah.
it's felt about like, five different jobs within it because it's changed so much over that time.
Yeah, I love that. It's not for the faint-hearted as well. We'll go into that a little bit in this conversation, being at a startup. But yeah, super, super fun when you find yourself as part of that journey. I'd love to pick into your background though, because it's not a traditional route into tech, which we love to hear on this podcast and why it was started as well. All the weird and wonderful routes into tech. So you started out in graphic design. What first sparked your interest in coding, even as something that was on the side at the time? What was that? Was it a person, something you'd seen, somebody else doing it? What sparked your interest?
Yeah, well, I had been doing quite a bit of freelance web design work on the side of my full-time design job at the time. And I'd thought, you know what, I want to get a bit more of a well-rounded view of how this works. If I'm going to be designing for websites, I should probably know at least a little bit about what goes into actually making them. So I started doing just little free online courses, tiny little projects. And, obviously, I love creating anything. And I had that realization that I've suddenly discovered this entirely new mode of creation. And it felt like a whole new world had opened up. And I started paying attention at that point to the insanely creative things that other design-minded people were doing with tech, and realizing that, they have this ability to have an idea and take it all the way into something that actually works and that people can actually use. And that's so satisfying and cool. And it
Yeah,
felt like I was able to exercise a part of my brain that I hadn't been able to access in such a long time. I'd felt at the
yeah,
time that I'd really plateaued in my job. I was kind of not pushing myself. And suddenly I'm doing something where I'm having to really push myself. I'd boxed myself into being a creative arts and humanities girl. And I had that realization that I was limiting myself for no reason. And it's suddenly so exciting to unlock so many more things to do and try and experience, once you realize that there are things that you wouldn't have associated with that more limited version of yourself, they're things that you can access and you can have so much fun with.
Did you think that about tech originally? And when you said there were people that you were looking at that was like, actually, they're doing really creative things to bring ideas, through to people actually using them. And was that when you actually think of like the techie side of tech and the coding, was that kind of a misconception where you were like, I'm already in the creative part, they're not, they do the technical part.
Yeah, 100%. And I think to some degree I had to actively seek it out. I think
Mm,
we have a very strong idea of what tech is and it being kind of like purely about code and purely about kind of, I saw it as very much maths heavy and it felt as if it was separated completely. And I think there is, a level to which that is a distinction that's made quite purposefully by people sometimes. But once I had that little foot in the door and I started to do more research and I started to look around me, that's when I started to see, oh, it's so much more than I thought it was. I think you have to fight through that first level of jargon and almost people wanting it to seem as if it's this kind of like very separate esoteric skill that, only a few can access. And then once I was able to kind of open that door and realize that wasn't the case, that's when things started to feel really, really exciting.
yeah, especially when you say math. Some people are like, I didn't like maths. And so if somebody would say to me, yeah, your whole job is going to be maths. Like, nope. No, thank you.
Oh my God, completely. And it's like even that feels like a shame because, I also was not a big fan of maths at school. And I always think about, I wonder if it had been spoken about differently or taught differently, if I would have been able to find more of a route in, because now I know
Mm,
that I love, that kind of much more technical problem solving and logic and stuff. But at the time, I just felt it felt alien to me. It felt again like a thing that other people do that I kind of struggle with. And I do wonder, like, oh, if we had kind of approached these things from a young age differently than we do, I bet so many more people wouldn't find it intimidating and wouldn't see it as an other people thing, but would see it as something that they could really engage in.
yeah, yeah, you're so right. Because in maths, it's very, you just get a paper back with, you got the answer wrong. And then it's like, well, actually, when you hit the world of work, it's like, well, you might get something wrong, but how did I get that wrong? How do I solve it this time around? And I think that's why I didn't like maths because it was very black and white. Got that wrong. That's
Yeah,
it.
and it was none of the kind of learning about why is something the way something is. It's
Yes,
like, okay, this is algebra, this is how it works, remember it or fail in your exam. There was
yes,
none of that concept of like, but why is algebra like that? Like,
yeah,
what do you mean that this is this? I always really thrived in places where I've been able to figure things out for myself and kind of really understand them. And maths didn't feel like the kind of thing where it was presented in that way. It was just presented to me. It felt like just like a memory test.
yes.
And that's not a very exciting thing to do.
No, definitely not, and not something that you would then, as a young person, think I'd love to go into a career in a STEM subject. Um, and then so you decided to learn coding, and what I'm wondering is though, how did you go from coding that was just a hobby, and then decide at that point that you wanted to actually build a career around it? What happened there? Was there some kind of flashpoint for you?
I mean, this was the bit that took a lot longer. So, originally I was seeing it as, hey, I can present myself as a graphic designer who also happens to have some of these skills. And, these skills aren't serious, but they're there. And, for a while I was thinking of applying for UX design jobs because it kind of felt like an in-between. It wasn't
Mm.
the scary thing of making the jump away from design. It was kind of like design, but make it tech in a way. So that mental jump to actually being like, wait, I can actually really do this was a lot harder. And I remember it actually been my dad being like, hey, you've been doing this coding thing for a while. Why didn't you apply for software jobs? And I thought he was insane. I was like, well, you've completely misunderstood. You have no idea who I am and what
Yeah.
I'm capable of. And like, I love your sense of belief, but ugh, silly. But that was enough to plant the seed, where
Yeah.
then after a while, I kind of really locked into the idea of it. And I think because it was so unexpected, I had this real attitude of like, well, literally, what on earth is there to lose? So I'd started applying for jobs quite early with the complete idea in my head of, well, I'm not going to get a job at this stage, but I really want to get a sense of like, what is the landscape like? Like, what is it like to apply for jobs in an industry that I'm not familiar with at all? How does tech work? What are the interviews like? What are the job descriptions like? So I was sort of like, almost randomly applying for things just to get this sense of practice and have a sense of what was going on. And then the field job came a lot quicker than I'd expected. So it was almost like suddenly, without having too much time to think about it, I'm now a software engineer. And
Yeah.
and that was it. And I think that's almost what did it was the fact that there was a speed to it that meant that I
Yes.
couldn't doubt myself.
Yeah. And then you found a company that was very open to you as well, that, didn't say to you, well, you have to have a computer science degree and a traditional background. And, we're not even going to give you an interview. They were just very open to your background and the fact that you were like, I know what I'm doing, but it's funny that so many of our community members say something similar, that once somebody gives you that nudge, it's like, what, I hadn't even thought about it. Like, that's but sometimes what people need. Like, I hadn't even considered a career in tech. And we have quite a few members who say, my husband was doing that for a living. And then I noticed, a lot of them said in lockdown, actually, because suddenly you're sharing a kitchen table working together. And I was like, I'd never even considered that as a career. And I'm so pleased that somebody did suggest that I could do that. And find a company like Field that is very open-minded and said, yeah, come, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, completely. I mean, so much of it is about exposure. It's being
Yeah,
able to see like what is this job? You hear vaguely about job titles, but you have no concept of what actually happens. And you can so easily trick yourself into thinking, well, that's for other people and good for them, but it's not
yeah,
for me. And I think one of the things that had really encouraged me when I was applying for field was the job description was written as if they really wanted a junior. I think we're all familiar with the thing of junior job descriptions, which also somehow are asking you to have 5 years of experience and also need
yeah,
you to have all these skills. And I remember the job description was written in that way of like, we know you're not going to have these things. That's fine. We're asking for juniors. What we want is someone who is super curious and super willing to learn and has the skill set that means that they're going to be able to take on information and they're going to be able to, begin helping and begin being a useful member of the team quickly. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be a ramp up period. And I think that gave me so much confidence to be like, oh, okay, I'm not kind of you know, being a fool by applying to this. I'm not kind of almost going ahead of myself. I am in the right place. I'm doing
yeah,
the right thing. And this is the expectation that I'm going to be going in without knowing everything. But I'm
yeah.
going in with the kind of mindset and the ability to learn. And that was the key thing.
Yes. Can I imagine as well if you landed at a different company, say you even made it in, but you didn't get that feeling when you did get in that you were in the right place, and that you're already feeling a bit like, is this for me? Like, I know I want to do this and I know I can do this, but landing at the right company that at least when you did get in there as well made you feel like you belonged there as well. You wouldn't have stayed 5 years. You probably would have gone back and gone, actually, this wasn't for me. I'll go back to being a graphics designer. It's fine.
God, completely. I think about this all the time. And I think I was quite conscious of it when I was applying for jobs, that I had this sense of like, I knew I was taking a risk and that, yeah, just one bad experience could really screw that up because you go to
Mm,
one place, it doesn't work out. The hit to your confidence could be so extreme. It could be so hard to be like, okay, back to the drawing board. Let's try again. And instead you'd think, oh, I've made a mistake.
yeah,
So I think I was really conscious when I was applying for things to look out for that kind of language that implied support, that implied that they actually, want to help you get to the stage where you can be a proper contributing member of the team without it, expectation being that you were just going to be able to hit the ground running and absolutely smash it out. And I remember specifically when I was doing my interviews with Field, the fact that I was from a design background was brought up as a positive thing multiple times, you know. It was this kind of thing of like, oh, it's so great that you're able to see things from this angle. It's so great that you're able to collaborate with design teams in this way. And the fact that it was, you know, actively called out as a positive as opposed to a negative that I wasn't from a computer science background made me immediately feel so excited and secure and like
Yeah.
I was bringing something to the team. It wasn't like charity that they were helping me out. It was that I
Yes.
was also able to bring
You're
it out for them.
bringing. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And you just would have gone in and got off on the right foot entirely, instead of feeling like, oh, they gave me a chance and I don't want to blow it because I got given this chance at a company that made me feel like I probably shouldn't be here. Um, yeah, I love that. That all starts in the interview process, and when you meet the TA managers and how they make you feel in that interview, because it is a two-way process interviewing. The feel that you get for that company, and whether or not you do actually want to accept their offer is another thing. You think actually that interview process was dreadful. I don't think I would like to work for your company, even if you did get offered the job. So um, yeah, it's how amazing when you look back sometimes and think, God, imagine if I'd done something entirely different or where that would have taken me. Some things are very meant to be. And because you had mentioned as well previously that you had this kind of mindset about tech of like, I'm going to hit a wall with it. Like I can learn and I'm doing it on the side as a hobby, but it's going to be really difficult at some point. Like I'm going to get to that point and I'm just not going to be able to go any further. And almost like it felt too hard, which is I hear that from so many people and what you think of as the tech industry, and you have to have a computer science degree, PhD, further maths is something that comes up a lot. What has your experience been instead though? Now you're actually in it. Like, did you actually hit the wall?
Oh, it's yeah, it's such a funny thing to think about because completely, I remember thinking very clearly at the beginning that tech would be like a hobby level thing for me, and then at some point it will naturally increase in complexity to such a degree that then that would be it. I would be out of, you know, out of my range. And I think I really believe that there was this fundamental difference between learning for the sheer joy of it and then actually having the skills necessary to have this as a career. But at some point, I realized, look, if I'm going to take this seriously, I'm almost going to have to like force myself to get rid of those notions. You know, you mentioned imposter syndrome earlier. We speak about it so often as women in tech. And I think I simply decided I wasn't going to feel like that, which I know is way easier said than done. And like I said, it was through force. This wasn't natural. This was like a complete process of like making myself believe this, but I decided I'm going to believe that I belong and that I have everything I need to be able to learn and develop my skills in software development just like everyone else in this industry. And I think I was helped by a couple of things that I decided to really focus on when I was starting to enter the workplace. One of which was like you said, this is hard, but it's hard for everyone, and that's why it's paid well. Like
Yeah.
when I find it hard, it's not because I'm too dumb or because I don't belong or that I'm not good enough. It's because it's a really, really specific technical skill, and it's going to take a long time to feel confident in it. And, you know, even then, it's still hard. It kind of stays hard. You just move on to doing more and more complex problems and fixing more complex things. And that's a really exciting challenge. That's what makes the job interesting. It's the reason I've been able to stay in the same role for 5 years, is that it always changes and there's always something new. So things feeling hard isn't a scary thing. It's kind of part of what keeps it exciting. And I think I was also really focused when I was going in that I was going to ask a million questions all the time and I was going to ask for help whenever I needed it. Because it is so, so tempting to stay quiet and to assume that people are going to think badly of you in some way for not knowing things. But you know, most people are lovely and most people really
Yeah.
want to help and they remember the times when they knew nothing. Like, you know, even the smartest person in the whole world is not born with some kind of innate knowledge of how React Native works, you know?
Yes.
And
Why don't I understand all this jargon that's coming with it? Nobody else does either.
exactly. Exactly. There's nothing about it's not about being smart or not smart. It's about there are things that you just simply have to learn and you don't know them until you know them. And if you're in the kind of workplace where you don't feel like you can ask for help, where you feel like that's a bad thing, then like we were just talking about, it's not the right workplace for you,
Yeah,
you know? And I think being able to see that it's not you that's kind of struggling because there's something wrong with you. It's that maybe the environment's not right. So yeah, I think with those things in mind, I was able to kind of decide either there's not a wall, or if there is a wall, I'll figure out somehow to climb it, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think as well, something that you figure out when you've been in work a little while, where even if you were in other jobs and you might have stayed there a year, 2 years, and then you've gone on to somewhere else, sometimes the grass isn't greener anyway when you do job hop that way and you think, I'm not enjoying it here, or I find this, what I'm doing really challenging. And then it had almost dawned on me a few years in where I was like, sometimes you're better to just tackle what you think is hard and to make the hard better rather than always just keep running from that, because you'll go somewhere else and then there'll be something at that company that you're not happy with and you think, oh, instead of just tackling what I should have done and just run towards it, I went somewhere else and somewhere else. And actually, when you do stay in the things that you think are challenging and hard and you do get through them, it's the most rewarding. And they're the places where you end up staying a lot longer because you were challenged at that company. You were given the space and the breathing space to be able to get over that challenge and then see, how you developed on the other side. But sometimes when we start at work, we're very much like, nope, not getting on here. I'm gonna go. That's it.
Totally. And again, it's the confidence thing of
Yeah,
when you felt like you've not been able to confront a thing that you thought you'd be able to. The hit to your confidence can be so big that then that has such an impact. And it is really hard to tell the difference sometimes between what is something that you should stay and figure out and fight through versus what's something that's fundamentally not right. And it's like
yeah,
that's not an easy distinction to make all the time. But being able again to kind of ask those questions of, am I being supported here? Am I in a place where I'm just too scared to ask questions, but actually they would be so happy to help me if I did? Or
yeah,
is it I'm in a place where people are, their expectations of me are wrong or the way they're treating me are wrong? But yeah, it's so rewarding to be able to power through those hard bits. And sometimes I do think, God, if I could have got through that first month or so at this company where, there wasn't really an onboarding process when I joined. It was a small place. So you were thrown into the deep end. It really was like, hey, welcome, here's some bugs, go fix them.
you
And
go.
it was obviously terrifying, but because I'd had that mindset, I was able to dive in 100%, ask a million questions. And, with a week or so of working at Field, I had code in production and I was immediately helping
Oh,
real users
amazing. Yeah.
with real problems.
What a confidence boost, though. Like being thrown, sometimes that being thrown into the deep end is so good. And how much confidence that they had in your ability to do it. And then for you to actually see that through, that whole experience must have been, as you said, really terrifying, but really rewarding.
Yeah, I think it set me up for success so well. Like I know other, people who've come up as junior developers who were in places where they weren't writing production code for, 6 months plus. And I think whilst I can understand having a slower onboarding process, I think it's really, really important to have someone start to feel valued and useful
Yeah.
as soon as you can possibly get them to feel useful. And if that means, spending a lot of time pairing with people and giving a lot of support, I think it's so important and you're setting them up for success in such a huge way. Where if you're sort of sat around as a junior, not sure what you're doing, not sure if you're good enough, not sure if you can ask questions, not sure how you're going to be able to contribute, I think that process is going to be so much slower to get you to a stage where you're actively a really, really great member of the team.
Yeah, yeah, you're definitely not going to flourish at that company. And I wanted to dip into that a little bit as well because you'd mentioned that working at Field had shaped your growth as a front end developer, especially in terms of feeling um, uh, supported and developing your skills. You you said that you got thrown in the deep end at the start, and obviously that really shaped your um, experience and staying there and moving forward. So, is there anything else about how you have felt developed and being given that freedom to grow? And do you also have extra learning time at Field and all of those things that kind of come with working at a company that has really noticed that you have had brilliant potential and obviously have flourished into a valued employee?
Yeah, completely. I mean, for one, like aside from, again, immediately being kind of actively helping from a technical level, I think I was very much valued straight away for the other skills that I brought to the team from having a non-traditional background. I mean, like I mentioned, that was brought up from my very first interviews. And I think being more design and product minded, being from a background where I have to care about users and how they think and how they feel and what they experience, I was immediately appreciated for bringing that out, that angle, and for involving myself in those discussions that went beyond the technical. Like, because I find that stuff really interesting, I wiggled my way into so many meetings and calls and discussions about things that were technically outside of my remit, but is stuff that I think is super cool and interesting and important. And they were always so happy for that. You know,
Yeah.
I was never given the sense that I should be boxed into just writing code. I think it was so encouraged from the beginning of like, well, if you've got this kind of knowledge and you've got this interest, then yeah, come along to this meeting, come along to this discussion. Let's kind of find a way of having more integration between the design and the product teams and the engineering teams. So that was really, really important to me to feel like I don't have to put aside all of these other skills. It's actually really, really helpful. And same with my communication skills. Like I was presenting things team wide and company wide from so early on. And I think I was really appreciated for my enthusiasm for like collaboration and communication. And I think because that's not always the expectation for engineers, it felt like it was really seen and encouraged. So
Yeah.
there's all of that kind of day-to-day stuff, but also at Field, I think we're really lucky that, the kind of big value of the company that we kind of come back to all the time is about curiosity. We call Field the dating app for the curious, and I think that has like stayed as an internal value so much. Like we have this thing called the Curiosity Wallet where you get a certain amount of money every year to spend kind of on any sort of learning opportunity. So it doesn't have to be directly to do with your job. It's not like, okay, I'm just going to do a React Native course. It's can kind of be anything that feels inspiring. So people do like, pottery classes and dance classes and language classes. And I think that to me feels like such an important philosophy, again, about how the whole company is. It's about kind of that integration between you don't just do your thing. You are a full person who brings so many different experiences and so many different angles to what you do. So why just treat people as if they're only capable of doing one thing and encourage people instead to kind of explore all of these different things and then bring them back in. And it really has just created this work environment, which I think is so exciting because people really care because they can bring themselves fully. They can bring these different thoughts. They can be like, oh my God, I saw this thing the other day and it really made me think about this. And, I'm really excited about this project and I kind of had an idea for something. We've got a thing at work where if anyone has any sort of feature idea, there is a way of formally proposing that and requesting that no matter where in the company you work. And it's all of that, I think, that kind of just makes you feel excited to bring your full self into work and be able to kind of bring all these different angles. And yeah, that's been huge. So it's been that kind of technical development where I'll do the classic things, the conferences, the whatever. but having all of that other stuff be not just accepted, but really, really encouraged, I think has been such a key thing to my development.
And to keep you learning other things, even if they're not work related, is so wise because in tech, you always have to be learning, and that takes a certain type of person. It's not like I've left university, I got my degree, that's it. Like tech is changing so often that you have to stay in that mindset of, I want to try new things. And like you said, whether or not it's pottery or a dance class, that takes a certain person to think I'm open to learning and trying new experiences, rather than just, well, I got the job and now I'll do the training around that job. But actually, it's going to feel a bit of a chore for me every time I need to learn something new for that job because that's not I'm not very open minded, um,
Yeah,
in that
completely. I mean, I
way.
think about this a lot when, I've had a lot of different women who have, friends of friends or whatever, who have come to me since knowing that I work in tech to be like, hey, I think I'm really interested in coding. Like, what advice would you give? And I kind of see quite a lot of questions from people who seem to really not like the learning part. They're like,
Yes,
how do I stay motivated during learning? I'm really struggling with this. And I often have to kind of say, like, unfortunately, learning's a really big part of the job. It's not the kind of job where you do it, you do your course, you qualify, and then that's it. It's kind of the whole job. And for me, that's the best. That's so exciting. That means like you feel like you're never getting stuck, you're never plateauing, you are kind of constantly challenging yourself. But obviously, for some people, fair enough, that just does not interest them at all.
yeah,
And you're completely right. I think having a workplace that really encourages that of like, no, you can't just come in with the skills you had and then sort of just coast off that. You have to be building, you have to be finding interest in things. It's, yeah, exactly as you said. I think it's really wise. I think it benefits the company so much.
mm,
Um, and it benefits the people in the company. Like it's also really fun, and
yes.
it's exciting and it kind of it motivates you loads when you have opportunities like that.
Yes, exactly. I always think of it as like, when you're at a company that you really enjoy learning and coming up with new things and thinking, I've come up with this idea. How are we going to make that work? You almost get this like brain tingles where, like, my thing sometimes I'm like, I had an idea. I was washing my hair and I had an idea. How are we going to make this work? If I didn't enjoy what I did coming up with ideas and how do we come over challenges, I wouldn't be washing my hair thinking about how are we going to get over that challenge. I would just shut off and not keep thinking about how are we going to do this and how are we going to solve that problem. You just shut off after work. But and also you do need boundaries. Obviously, you do need to shut off at that point. But when you have that moment where you're like, that would be a great idea. How are we gonna execute that? Like, wouldn't that be cool? Let's test that. And knowing that it's okay to test, even if it goes wrong, because we'll learn from that. But to be in an environment where you can come in and say, yeah, I had a really good idea. I was washing my hair and I had a great idea. Like, how can we try and implement that into what we do day to day? It makes such a difference to your mental health and work environment and just everything. And then when you don't have that, when you go into a company, you don't have that. It's almost like you immediately know that's not for you. Not going to be here long.
Could not agree more. And I think there are so many different things that can support that. Like one of the things that I can't imagine now living without is the flexible working that we have at Field.
Yeah,
I mean, especially because we're an international team, so we work on so many different time zones, and it's fully remote. That sense of being able to be like, you know what, I'm stuck on something, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to do my laundry and maybe I'll have a bit of
yeah,
a longer lunch than normal and maybe I'll, do all of these other things. That kind of like pressure that's then lifted, that then can clear your mind and mean that you can go back to something and be like, oh, I've got it. I've
yes,
got it whilst I'm on my little walk. That's when it came to me. And I do think, God, we limit people so much when we don't give them that kind of opportunity to take a step back. When you are just non-stop in an office, long hours all the time, and kind of having to do that thing a little bit of performing work. You know, when you're in an
Yeah,
office and you see people sort of like rolling around on their chairs and clicking around on their laptops, but you can see they're not really doing anything. And it's like, of course they're
yeah,
not doing anything because no one can work non-stop for just hours and hours and hours. You need those kinds of moments of coming away from something a little bit, having a chat, having a move around. And it also just makes you so much more enthusiastic. Like, I am willing to put in extra time when there's like a really big important project because I also know that there's times when I'll finish early because there's an England match on or because
yes,
I want to go see a friend or that kind of like give and take where it's like I know that my time is respected. That means that I'm so happy then to put in the extra effort and the extra time when it's needed.
yes. Rather than 9 to 5, I've shut off. I'm not thinking about anything after that time. And you are right. In the office, it's more of a counting down the hours. I'll pop out in the afternoon to walk around the block and get a coffee, but it's not really enough time. And then I'm just counting down when can I go home. And then I when we did hybrid, it was kind of the things you would do in the office would be different than the things you would do at home because I knew I was less motivated in the office. And I would just sort of go through the motions on those days, whereas the other days I was like, well, these are my actual days where I can get things done. Um, so yeah, having somebody trust you as well that you can actually, do your job and still go above and beyond and still do really well. It makes so much of a difference when you are trusted in your own abilities, definitely. And I wanted to ask your opinion as well about now you're in it and you know that it is not quite what you thought it was going to be, and it is creative. What would you say to other creatives who think tech is too intimidating or that they wouldn't belong in it?
Oh my God, I mean, just the key thing is just do not box yourself in. Like, how boring to do that to yourself when there's this whole world out there. So why tell yourself that you can only engage in certain parts of it? I think it really, really helps to see the links between things. Like, creativity is all about problem solving. Software is all about problem solving. And like I mentioned earlier, I think those links can be easier to see when you start to, actively seek out the really cool things that like some creative coders are doing, people that are kind of working on things that aren't necessarily what you would associate with traditional tech. You've got to find the parts of tech that interest you. Like I knew when I was applying for jobs, I couldn't work in fintech or whatever. And shout out to fintech, that would be the perfect industry for some people, but it just wouldn't be for me. I would find it boring. I'd find the product boring. And I knew that the product I was working on was really key because you're not just doing software development, you're doing software development for a specific product. And it needed to be something that I found really exciting and that I cared about. At Field, I really care about our users and I really care about the experiences that they have. And that makes when you're in the pits of solving some kind of horrific bug so much better when you have that kind of immediate association with like what will the impact be on the actual people that use this app. And I think it's also so important to value the skills that you already have. There are so many software developers out there who will not have the skills that you already have. And often skills that you'll have without even really having to try that hard to have them.
Yeah,
The longer I work as an engineer, the more 100% sure I am that being product minded, caring about the end user, collaboration, communication, all of these things are just as important as coding. If you're a software developer that can just write code, even if it's the best code in the world, if you don't have those other things, you are just so, so limited as an engineer. And being a creative person, you're coming from a different angle, you're coming with a different approach to other people, and that's going to be so beneficial, like to the team and then also to the user at the end of the day. So yeah, I think it's about going in knowing that you have so much to give and potentially so much to get back if you manage to find the right environment.
yeah, definitely. And that sense of purpose that you just summed up perfectly there, that you care about your users and you see them using it at the end, and having that, just being part of those users' journey as well, is just makes such a difference to your day to day, that you, like you said, there are some industries where you might be doing good things, but you might not really notice the actual how the users are using it at the end of the day, and being part of people's lives and their experiences. But that's so great at Field that you get to be a part of that, and know that you were part of the cog in their little machine as well, and their journey along the way, in their relationships as well. Must be so rewarding to be a part of that. So it really does make a difference which company you pick, and where you decide to stay as well, and develop.
Yeah, completely. I mean, like I have really close friends who have met their partners on Field, or we get messages about people who have had babies with people they've met on Field. These are those things that are like, it almost feels insane to think,
Yeah,
wow, this
I
is
was
like,
part of that.
yeah, those days that I'd be sat there so annoyed because I can't figure out this thing. And it's like, and then I figured it out, and then someone had a baby. It's like,
Like,
that's
amazing.
just unbelievable. And it's so exciting. And it's just exciting being at a place which is kind of part of a cultural conversation as well. Like, I love when I go to parties and things and I speak to people about Field, and people are so excited. Like, they have so many
Yeah,
questions and they're like, oh my God, I've been on Field dates. And it's just really, really fun. And I think being at a place for as long as I have, from the time when it was a lot smaller, I've really felt like I've had a hand to some degree in kind of shaping what it is
yeah,
at this stage. And that's such a cool feeling.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that's what I would really, really advise, is really think about that. And we were talking earlier about that idea that interviews are two-way streets. And I understand, especially when you're trying to break into a new industry, that it doesn't feel like that. It feels like you're begging for a job and like, please take me seriously. But it is so important that you really do think about that, about where am I going to be able to feel excited? Where's learning going to feel really good for me? Where am I going to make a product that I can feel proud of or excited by? And yeah, keep that in mind. Don't see it as they're doing charity work by extending the privilege of working in tech to you. You're bringing this amazing set of skills and this amazing background. So find the place that's going to be able to support you in that, and allow you to flourish.
yeah. Well, that is amazing positive advice to end this on, because we are already out of time. I could keep picking your brains on being a creative and working in tech, but we are already out of time. So thank you so much, Ella. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a delight. Thank you so much. And yeah, just love to yap. So anytime anyone has any questions about being a creative in tech, you just hit me up, because yeah, it's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. We'll include a link to you as well, so our users can reach out to you if they have any questions or align with your story, which I'm sure a lot of them will. But thank you. And for everybody listening, as always, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see you again next time.